what I found as I've been privileged to go out to where the tribes are is that there's sort of the same story, but different story. It's the same story, but it's a different story, sort of everywhere.
The doctrine of discovery is the current system of laws and policies that justify the removal of land from indigenous peoples. These laws are rooted in church doctrines that originated in the 15th century.
Together, we will uncover this deep structure of colonization that systematically deprives indigenous peoples of human rights.
I'm Sheri Hostetler, and I help start a coalition of Anabaptist people of faith that seek to dismantle the doctrine of discovery. I'm also a Mennonite pastor in San Francisco.
And I'm Sarah Augustine, and I also help start this coalition. As an activist and scholar, I'm the descendant of the Tewa people and a displaced person. This is the Dismantling the Doctrine of Discovery podcast. Welcome to Allen Buck. So Dr. William Allen Buck is a Cherokee Native American Ordained Elder, currently serving at Great Spirit, the only United Methodist Native American Church in the Oregon Idaho Annual Conference of the United Methodist Church. He's also the director of the Circle of Indigenous Ministries for the United Methodist Church. With over 20 years of experience in contextual community development, primarily within the United Methodist Church, he has the privilege of starting, staffing, and growing a wide array of groups, gatherings, cohorts, events, and retreats. He has also served on various boards and committees while actively engaging in social justice efforts. His doctoral work focused on community development, and he is passionate about education and advocacy on several issues, including equality, the environment, Native American rights, addiction, public safety, family, interfaith dialogue, and public service. He is deeply committed to incarnational and relational community development, where he focuses on building community through relational small groups, shared interests, values, service, and practice. Social justice, especially advocating for the rights and protection of Indigenous peoples' spaces, traditions, cultures, and wisdom, is at the heart of his work. He is also passionate about addressing issues surrounding the environment, civil rights, education, intergenerational trauma, and poverty. His vision is to help create a beloved community where all people are embraced and uplifted. So, welcome, Allen. What an amazing introduction bio that you have. But I wanted to also say, Sheri, I'm so excited to invite to you my friend and brother, Allen Buck. Allen and I have worked together, I don't exactly know how long, but a while. And gosh, it's been wonderful to dream and imagine and build together some responses to colonization in the Christian church. Welcome, Allen. I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate you. Thanks for the introduction. And I'm coming to you right now from Toppenish, Washington, which is just down the road from where sort of you and I connected around White Swan. And that was where we really started to get to know each other. And I'm
Oh, that's right.
here right now. And you're not.
That's
You're
right.
somewhere else.
That's right. I'm in Toppenish right at this moment. Well, Allen, I wonder if you could please talk about the Methodist Circle of Indigenous Ministries. Let's start there.
The Methodist Circle of Indigenous Ministries is a new development, well, a couple-year-old development. It's an attempt for the United Methodist to really prioritize and put into action uh, their values. So yeah, they're uh, making us a priority, and it's meant that we are becoming a resource for the existing Indigenous ministries and hopefully involved in future Indigenous ministries and new developments, but also in relationship with the existing church and the sort of more uh, dominant culture church. In the Methodist Church, anyway, yeah, that's the majority of our folks and churches. But yeah, we're a resource, so sort of coaching and consulting with the existing leaders involved in leadership development, doing work, helping churches to do their uh, land genealogy work, land acknowledgement work, involved in yeah, a lot of different areas. But it's a new thing, and I said it was kind of. I think we're becoming we're becoming a thing, and
Mm,
I'm really privileged to be the director of it because I get to be involved in many models of decolonization in
mm,
the church and a lot of good relational work, and it aligns with my values. And I feel called to this place right now, and I get to meet great people like you, Sarah, and you all. And yeah, thanks for having me here.
mm. So, Alan, I understand that you wrote a plan for the Western District Committee on Native American Ministries for the United Methodist Church. And just to be, I think I understand this correctly, that the Western District is actually about a third of the country, in terms of like Episcopal, I'm sorry, United Methodist congregations. So, this is a plan that's really for a large part of the United Methodist Church.
Yeah,
And would
that's right.
yeah, good. I'm glad I got that right. So, would you be willing to tell us more about this plan?
Yeah, you got most of it right. I mean, the language is complicated. The plan was written for the Western jurisdiction of the United Methodist Church.
Okay.
Districts are the way that we divide up our annual conferences, but the Western jurisdiction represents 7 annual conferences, which then I don't know how many districts that divides up into, but the 7 annual conferences, um, yeah, so California, Colorado, Alaska, Washington, Nevada, um, a little bit of New Mexico, a little bit of Canada. I'm
Hmm.
sure I'm forgetting people. Idaho, um, a lot of Methodists are represented in that area where, yeah, we wrote a plan. I was the chair of a group called the Western Jurisdiction Committee on Native American Ministries um, for about 6 years. And yeah, we too were a new development. We became a new development in the Western jurisdiction. And one of the first things we did was work to write this plan. But to say that I wrote it, that might be a stretch, except that I was the chair and sort of held it for a long time and walked with a representative group of Native leaders to discern values and priorities. And then met Sarah, who helped to write it with me over several months, and we were bouncing it off of many groups, bishops and other institutional leaders, and really kind of along the way a collaborative effort. Um, and I am really grateful to have been a part of it. And I'll tell you just a little bit about it and a little bit why, because the content, I believe, if those annual conferences in Western jurisdiction will implement this plan, that it'll have a big impact.
mm,
Uh, for Native people and for the church. And but the plan itself is basically 4 sort of areas: uh, truth telling work, um, repair, intentional repair work, self determination possibilities, and realizing, helping us to realize some self determination possibilities within the institution, uh, and leadership development. Um, those are kind of the main areas, unless I've messed it up. But think that's I think that's the gist of the plan, and it passed unanimously. And so we've met with the bishops in each annual conference and with leaders in each annual conference, and they have agreed to yeah, work with us to uh, help them to implement this plan.
Yeah. Well, um, I know that you mentioned that the first step here on this plan is to tell the truth. So I'm
Mm.
wondering if you can tell us more about these truth-telling activities that you're leading.
Well, in my biographical information, you might catch that I've really specialized in ministry in uh, the area of development, and I've tried to do that in a less colonial kind of way. And I've called that a relational way. I mean, really, that's what I sort of have studied and what I've always practiced in ministry. I've been a pastor for a long time, 25 years. So everywhere I've tried to uh, do that. And yeah, this focus on relational ministry is really a way that I sort of walk and practice my own spiritual life, just as an individual, but also as a pastor and a person who gets to go into a lot of different cultures and tribes and places and spaces, you know. And what I found is if you're not willing to tell the truth and be real with people, then the potential for a relationship is really low. Or um, if you have a dysfunctional relationship uh, from the get-go, and you're not willing to tell the truth, then there's really not a whole lot of potential for healthy um, outcome. But if you are willing to tell the truth, then maybe there's a chance, I think. And I could get all philosophical about it because I studied philosophy in undergrad school. I wrote papers about truth, and it's just been a kick that I've been on too. But I'm not the only one, Jesus, the truth will make you free. And, there's a lot of, and I believe the big spiritual movements like the civil rights movement and Martin Luther King and those folks, they were powerful because they had the truth on their side. And I don't know exactly how all that works, but I think if we will do the work together to tell the truth, what I mean by that is the story that the church has told about our relationship with indigenous people is very different from the one that native people have been carrying and telling for generations. And we need to come together, in a different kind of way. And it's going to require that the church uh, demythologize itself and tell the truth and dig deep,
Hmm.
and do the work. And then maybe there's potential for some friendship. Now, I'm not obligating Native people to
Yeah.
that at all. I'm just saying I don't think you can have the new kind of move into love and connection and all of that without that work. That the repair work is hard to get done if you don't know the truth and if you can't build enough trust with the actual people to on the ground to um, determine what needs to be done to help begin to repair. Then well, I hope that answers the question. I just see
Well,
it, and I've done lots of reading in other places, but Sarah helped to shape that up as well and may know more about it than I do. But Sarah and I have shared a lot of synchronicity on this journey, just as far as our values and our paths. And the truth telling, it just had to be first, and the church too, and the Methodist Church, they've done some of this work like back in 1912. I mean, uh, 19 I mean 2012 and 2016, they had these big pushes to do work that they called oh, what did they call it, Sarah? The acts of repentance. Like each annual conference was called to do these kind of acts of repentance, and I think that was a good first effort. Had some truth telling, but it didn't go far enough. Not all the annual conferences did what they were supposed to do. And after that, since that time, kind of all the Native people and many of the others within the institution have been asking, like, what's next? Like, what's next? And I already mentioned kind of land acknowledgments and land genealogies and those kinds of things. All of those are just starting places, they're superficial, but they have the potential in them to begin to cause us to ask questions about so what and how are we related and what's next if we'll do the work. There's just some deep work that needs to be done so that, yeah, maybe we could uh, love people and be connected and live into our better life, be liberated. That's really about liberation for the church, but
yeah.
also for uh, to continue to liberate and try to liberate uh, and redeem kind of our relationship with Native people, with everybody, with the whole world. This is still happening, it's still it's also, countercultural, and it's one of the things that they don't want us to do anymore. They don't want us to do DEI or talk about the systemic problems or any of that stuff. They don't want to do the truth telling. And so it's a very different. I'm proud of this work. I expect the Western United States to be some of the leaders. They've been leaders in other areas, LGBTQIA and other things. I expect the West to lead, and then we're pushing them. This is pushing them to be uh, transparent and to do the work. And I'll say that Sarah and I have started groups in the greater Northwest area, which is 3 of the annual conferences. Uh, I think we had 80 people sign up, and we might end up with about 40 people, 45 maybe, active in our groups, divided up into 6 categories around uh, boarding school and sort of certain characters that come up, and our involvement in adoption agencies and all these places that have been identified where the Methodist or Methodist Episcopal Church needs to tell some truth. We have a team of people. It's not Native people doing the work. It's the dominant culture people doing the work, but we're helping. Sarah and I are helping them, and we're just getting started. And I don't know what the outcome of it will be, but God's going to do more with it than I can imagine anyway. Like, I think this will give us a chance to do more land back, and make other recommendations that matter. But we got to do this work first, the truth telling first.
Well, one of the things I really think about, Alan, is, when I was going through school, the K-12 system, and I'm an Indigenous woman, but even so, there wasn't, I remember I grew up in Albuquerque, but my people are from New Mexico. And um, even so, the textbook that we had, I think it was like 6th grade, 5th grade, where we talked about Native Americans and American history, there were 2 pages about Plains Indians in New Mexico, which is so funny because it's like it's Indian country, right? And I guess part of this challenge of telling the truth, and this, is that there has been this process of making invisible our history, the history of the United States, both from the perspective of Indigenous people and from the perspective of the colonial project. So as you're leading these groups through telling the truth, how does that work? This is not just passing a resolution to the church and say, hey, you need to tell the truth, so here be it. You know what I mean? You're actually organizing teams of church people to tell the truth about things they don't know about. How are you doing that?
Well, with the Spirit's help and with your help, I'm not an expert. We've kind of ventured into a place that is pushing an edge even for me. Like, I don't feel like I'm an expert at this. Um, but we're trying to help them to just live reflective sort of lifestyles themselves, and um, become a little more culturally competent along the
Mm,
way too, and um, to learn to listen, I think, at
mm,
a deeper level. And the way I see each kind of, we have them divided into small groups now. And so it's interesting for me to watch them evolve,
mm,
because they're each going to do different ways of doing it. But I've been on a few field trips now. I keep getting it. So we're not micromanaging those groups, but engaged with those groups, and to see, like, well, you went with me to one, Sarah, when we went to Salem to the Jason Lee Memorial United Methodist Church. Jason Lee is one of these characters that comes up a lot. I've since then taken another field trip out that way to Mission Park, uh, just to see some of these spaces in real life, but to go with members of the team who they're doing the work. You know what I mean? And so I think Sarah and I, in some ways, are sort of um, encouragers. That's the way I've felt, like encouragers. And I definitely am engaged in the strategic part in our institution, like trying to lay the groundwork for what's going to happen to this work after, as it sort of comes into being over the next, I'd say 4 years. Uh, it's a lifetime worth of work. We didn't even capture all the categories probably, but we'll have a couple of teams ready by this summer, I think, to do some initial reporting to the annual conferences in the greater Northwest. And they'll probably have recommendations about that will matter,
Hmm.
about what they recommend that we do based on what they've found out. So that's a little more where I'm living. I don't know, Sarah. I'm curious what you would say about that. Just like, I don't know how we're doing it, except we've called them together. We're trying to get them together once a month with Sarah and I, where we will bring some content to the conversation and a little bit of training, but also to give each of the groups an opportunity to report there. And if anything, we're just trying to help focus that, I think, more and more, like
Hmm.
to make sure that they're um, kind of focused in the right areas, um, just as a team, like as a collaborative uh, effort. And I don't know, I hope that Sarah and I, or some of the other people that are involved, are maybe a little more sensitive to uh, the American myth. That's how my friend Mark Charles always talks about it. Like the American mythology, we may be more well versed in that, or see a bigger picture or connections maybe that, and we can help each team to navigate some of those things. But they're doing the work, that's the whole idea is
Hmm.
the native people are not doing the research and writing. Um,
Yeah, in the coalition, the way we think about that is that we follow Indigenous leadership. That's you, Alan, and the nuts and bolts heavy lifting is done by church people. They're the ones who have reaped the benefit, and they're the ones that are doing the work. And they can't do that without Indigenous leadership. But Indigenous leadership doesn't mean Indigenous people doing all the work. And one thing that I just notice as I've been learning so much from you, Alan, in this work is how these people in these groups, these Christians, amazing people, and kind, compassionate, well educated, often well prepared people. The people that the stories and people they're investigating and really learning about, these have been held up as heroes in the church. And so you talked about demythologizing earlier, and I think that's it. And I think that is sacred work and also so challenging to be willing to challenge some of the the notions and beliefs that and the stories we've told as Christians about these folks who are actually sometimes land barons, and they're coming in, directly benefiting financially from some of this from the colonial project.
my influence maybe on the plan itself did emerge from some of the work that I was already engaged in as the director. And also, yeah, not being from here, like I moved here from Oklahoma. My tribe's not here, my tribe's in Oklahoma. And that's all I'd really ever known. And then I was in an urban setting where it was a kind of many different tribes. Um, but I started to learn some about the local tribes, and the ministry that we were doing at Great Spirit really gave birth, connected us to many places where I think that we've been able to build
Mm.
some trust and be engaged. That gave birth to uh, the circle uh, itself. And that work, really, what I found as I've been privileged to go out to where the tribes are, is that there's sort of the same story, but different story. It's the same story, but it's a different story, sort of everywhere that I've been. And right here where I am in White Swan is one of the most traumatic that has impacted me and stayed with me. And I think the plan itself is sort of born out of that because it's been a few years since. But my first trip here, when I went into, there's a church here, a mission named the um, Wilbur Memorial, and Father Wilbur. Anyway, as I met some people there, and I started to ask the Yakima people and the people that I met, tell me about kind of the church's relationship with the tribe. And one of the questions I asked was like, who's who's Father Wilbur? I didn't know, And the first story that I heard about him was that he was real hard on the native traditional spiritual people. They called dreamers um, and the Catholics. That this guy, Father Wilbur, and that he went to an area called the Dalles when he heard about a new spiritual leader, a new dreamer kind of coming up, and that he went to the Dalles and snatched up this guy, and that the guy was never heard from again. It, it was a straight up mythological kind of story, or like because that was the first story that I heard when I asked, like, I mean, I was asking, tell me about the name of the church that is meant to serve the Yakima people, you know, like how's our relationship or I'm trying to discern the nature of our relationship. And then I'm asking about this name and I hear this story and then I'm like, whoa, yeah, no wonder, Yakima people won't talk to us. No wonder Yakima people don't trust us. They don't have any reason to trust us. No wonder it's the same old, like the person who it's named after. The first story you tell me about him is that he hunted down traditional spiritual Yakima people. Oh, I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And then I found out this guy, Father Wilbur, I've learned a lot since then. And there's a group that's digging more into him. But he started Fort Simcoe, was involved in all of these just terrible things. I went back to Portland and I talked to with some of my relatives at the drum circle. And I told them this story about Father Wilbur. And one of my friends said, oh, I used to live in White Swan, and my grandparents told us never to go into that church, that it was haunted.
Wow.
Well, that's exactly what a native person would do if, like the native people are telling their kids that this church is haunted because that goes way, way back. That's the way we did it. If we didn't want our kids to go over to that river or that cave or that dangerous place or whatever, we would tell them a story about a monster or say that it was haunted, and we have all kinds of stories like that. Like, you don't go over there, you know. It's
Well,
a
so
total
Father,
mythology. It's a total mythology, and yeah, it's traumatic, and I think it gave birth to this need for the truth telling. Like, there's no way we could even begin to heal this. We're so in the negative in our relationship with the Yakima people. Like, where do we even start? Because no
Yeah.
one's told the truth. Because Father Wilbur is celebrated as a hero because he was the first pastor at Portland First. Like, his picture's hanging on the wall, Portland First Methodist, and he's a hero, just like Jason Lee and all these other guys.
So Father Wilbur was the first so-called Indian agent of the Yakima Reservation, which is to say, he was the BIA agent, and he was the founder of the boarding school at Fort Simcoe. So to name a church after him that is so named today, he was the founder of a concentration camp from the indigenous point of view, and it's tough to have an institution named after him. He was known historically, and this is in the historical record, to withhold foodstuffs from indigenous people if they continued to practice native spirituality, including, and there was corporal punishment and so on. Like, it was because he was the agent of the reservation, he was able to withhold um, uh, monies and food and other resources that were guaranteed by treaty.
So for my work in the development, it's like, what are you going to do? You can't do anything. Like, we have this building, we have an asset that's what are we going to do there's no trust with the people that we're trying to serve. Like, we have to start all the way over, and we are going to have to tell the truth and pray about it, and then be in conversation with them, build enough trust, hopefully, where we can be in conversation with the Yakima people about what happens to that property. So
Hmm.
in my experience, sometimes those become partnerships. Like there's one called the Stronghold down in Chiloquin that's we're partners with. Sometimes it becomes land back, which there's going to be more. We've done land back with the Nez Perce after some relational work, and there's more land back about to happen in Lapway with the Nez Perce. That's pretty fresh information. But you see, how are we going to do that with the Yakima? They won't even talk to us, and what we're involved in here is haunted. And yeah, what would they want to do? Honestly, I think I've said this to Sarah before, and I've said it to leaders in the Methodist Church. I wouldn't be surprised at all if they wanted to burn it down, like they did some of the ones in Canada, you know. Um, uh, and if they did, I'll strike the match, you know. I'll help them do that, and something new can be born if that's what it takes for this situation to be redeemed, liberated, or begin to be healed, or made right, if that's even possible, you know. Like, how are we going to do that? So these things take years and years and years to evolve, and I'm just so grateful to be uh, involved in it.
I think that's such a helpful reminder to white settler folks that this takes years and years and years and years. Because one thing I have seen and feel it in myself is okay, well, what's the 10-year plan? What's the 5-year plan? How do we let's, I think sometimes there's just like the patience and humility it takes for some white settler folks to just be like, this is about the slow work of building relationship and the really slow work about building trust by telling the truth, and that this is actually probably multi-generational work, just like the 4-point plan you talked about: truth telling, intentional repair, self-determination, and leadership development. It's all has to start happening now, and yet this is this is the work of generations. And as Sarah has said numerous times, that I have found so helpful, like it took decades and centuries to erect the to have the to build the doctrine of discovery, to build all of these policies, laws, and just philosophies and thought forms. It's going to take decades to dismantle it, but I hear you saying it's just good to be on that road.
Hmm.
Yeah. And I guess I have a question of when you think about what are your hopes for the Methodist Church and for Indigenous peoples as a result of this plan getting executed? This one I just said is probably multi generational in focus, but what are your hopes for the Methodist Church and for Indigenous peoples?
Well, for the Methodist Church, my hope is that they could really live into with integrity, um, the gospel as I understand it. You know, um, that they would be followers of Jesus and be about, acting in ways that liberate, and that are connected, and that obligate us to everyone and to our ancestors and those who come after. That's really and I don't think that I feel exactly the same way about like Native people. I wouldn't lump in the two even. I mean, I want liberation for Native people, but I don't feel like they need to be the ones to fulfill the gospel. I think they're connected to wisdom older than our gospel that aligns and includes our gospel, and that is much more universalistic, and that our institution and many other places, many institutions should listen to them and amplify
Mhm.
their wisdom, and
Mhm.
not just give them a seat at the table, but make them a priority, and listen, yeah, hear their wisdom so that we might be connected and be, uh, yeah, relatives and family. So it kind of comes at it from both ways, and I'm in a strange place as a Methodist minister too, because I'm almost assimilated, or some people might say that I am, but my spiritual walk is always I've always kept one foot out the door with the church and asked hard questions, um, and I knew it was broken when I chose, when I felt called and to participate in it. And I've thought many, many times about leaving and still do. But I get called back in, and then I see how God, how I get to be part of just making a bit of a difference, and hopefully this is, so I still feel called to it. And who knows what God's going to do uh, with that. But, um, yeah, that's my hope. I want them to have integrity, I want them to be able to live their values, like really put it into action. I believe in, I believe in love and Jesus and um, my hope. I have a lot of hope for the church right now that they will be that place of organized, a lot of times resistance, that the church would even be the place that's resisting people that celebrate a different gospel, one that is taking and colonizing and still active in so many places in the United States and all across the globe, active taking from people. Sorry, I'm a preacher. I could go on and on. I just start riffing.
Oh, Alan, you're singing my song. You're singing my song, brother. Oh.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I wanted to just ask you this general global question. Is there anything else you want us to know about and our listeners? What would you like us to know about? I mean, what would you like us to take away from this very inspiring work of repair that you're doing? We talk about repair in the coalition and we attempt it, in various levels, and you are doing it in the context of the Methodist Church. You are really doing it, beginning with telling the truth. And what else do you want our listeners to hear about and know about?
Might be in line with what I was just saying. I really, I hope that people won't give up on one another. Uh, I hope that means too that you don't have to give up on the church or on Jesus. That we don't have to throw the baby out with the, it's a terrible saying, I guess, but it's a problematic. We're part of a problematic. We're all part of many problematic uh, institutions. The church, higher education, the healthcare system. I could go on and on about that, but uh, the problem is when those are used as tools to take from people and part of the colonial or white supremacist system. But I don't think that's what Jesus was about. You know what I mean? I don't think that's what um, higher education is meant to do in our lives or healthcare at all. It's like we create these institutions and then they. So I guess I'm saying just have hope too. That's what I would want people to know is, and the church is engaged, and there are places where you can get involved. You can support Sarah's work. You can support the Circle of Indigenous Ministries. Um, we'll make sure that you know about opportunities. I said there was land back about to happen. This would be fresh information. I don't know when the podcast goes out, but I think it's going to be March 26th in Lapway that there'll be a ceremony with the Methodist Church. If you drive into Lapway, there's a Methodist church that's been right on that main street for a long, long time. That's going to be given back to the tribe, and there'll be ceremony and celebration that day. So the church is doing some good things, you know what I mean, too. I think that's what I'd want people to know. Have hope. Don't become too jaded and give up. Resist where you can,
Hmm.
organize where you can, love and find hope where you can. And I hope that the church is one of those places, but it's not the only place. You know,
Hmm.
uh,
Hmm. I think those are really encouraging and loving words for all of us in this particular time. Um, I meet many people who I think can jump pretty quickly to despair, and I understand that. But your words in this interview is, I encourage. I think you've been preaching to us. Is I guess what I'm going to say. You've been preaching the good word to us, Alan, and I appreciate that.
Well,
Yeah.
and I wanted to say too, I mean, it's so clear to me, I just experience the Spirit in you so often, and I'm so grateful for that. What a joy, as I've been taught to say, to walk the earth and to breathe when you breathe, to be able to breathe the oxygen together.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
that. I experienced the Spirit in you too.
Mm.
And the synchronicity, just so everyone knows, I went to see another friend down the road in Wapato earlier today. I've been, to some big cities today, Wapato, and uh, I won't say his name, but I went in to see him, and I was telling him about this plan and the things that we're involved in, because I really need his help. I'm doing the relational work is what I'm doing. I'm trying to get local Yakima people involved, and build enough trust where, we can get a big meeting together to decide what happens. Anyway, so I went to see this friend. I was telling him about the plan and about all these things. And I mentioned Sarah, and he said, "Oh, I'm supposed to have a Zoom meeting with her in 15 minutes. Like, what? What? I didn't even know." And anyway, there's things like that that keep happening over and over and over
Mm.
again that brought Sarah and I together. And I
Mhm.
don't know what the fruit of all of that is, but it helped birth you know, the plan for Indigenous Ministries. It
Mm.
wouldn't have happened without Sarah helping to take all the crazy ideas and help write it all up and make it real, and who knows what else we're going to do. I'm excited about that. And I'm excited about the coalition,
Mm.
and what you all are doing and the many places, and so I'll help you and you help me and we'll help the Spirit. And
Mm.
I'm glad
Well,
we're in it together.
Me
yes.
too. So
Well, we're
grateful.
sure excited to be in this with you, and thank you so much for your time today. There from your hotel room in is it White Swan, Washington,
I'm in
Lapway,
Toppenish right now.
Toppenish, and Lapway is in where? What state is that in?
Lapway, Idaho is kind of it's the center of the Nez Perce, the Nimipu
Ah,
um,
okay.
tribe, but it's kind of where all the states kind of come together too.
Yeah.
Washington's right there, and Idaho and Oregon are kind of all right there, up that way, but it's Idaho.
Well, this podcast will likely come out after that date you mentioned, but just in case it doesn't, y'all get there to Lapway if you can on March 28th. All right.
Or
Well,
Google
thank you.
Google it. There'll be some information out there. You can celebrate with us.
Great.
Encourage other churches to do this if they, you know, are able.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
This podcast is hosted by us, co produced by the Coalition to Dismantle the Doctrine of Discovery and Anabaptist World.
The opinions expressed here are ours, however, and do not reflect official positions of Anabaptist World.
For more information, go to anabaptistworld.org and dismantlediscovery.org.
Our theme music is by Micah Peplow and Shannon Kaler. Thank you.